Ancient Egypt is credited with having one of the most complex and beautiful spiritual traditions of the ancient world. Ruled over by a powerful set of deities, the Egyptians are often looked at as people who revered life but knew it to be a stepping stone to eternal paradise with the gods. But to get there, they would first have to have their heart weighed by the god of the underworld, Anubis. Join us in this video as we explore the depths of the mystery surrounding one of ancient Egypt's most prominent deities. Is it really possible that the ancient Egyptians knew the secret to obtain a pleasant experience in the afterlife? Could a peaceful and loving existence on Earth take us there? And just how did Anubis and Osiris judge one's heart? Let's find out. The creation of Anubis. Anubis is one of the most mysterious yet best-known deities of ancient Egypt. Often portrayed as a man with the head of a jackal, or simply a jackal itself, he is always painted in black, a color that represents life, regeneration, and the soil of the Nile River. It is thought Anubis is one of the oldest deities and was worshipped as far back as the First Dynasty some 5,000 years ago. While little surviving legends exist of his origin, in some texts, he's portrayed as the son of Ra, whereas in coffin texts, he's said to have been the son of either the cow goddess Haset or the cat-headed Bastet. But the most likely origin is that Anubis was the illegitimate son of Nephthys and Osiris, and was later adopted by Osiris' wife, Isis. Anubis is a Greek rendition of the deity Egyptian name Anpu. The root of the name is said to mean royal child. He has various other names throughout the text, including Lord of the Sacred Land or First of the Westerners. Both seem to point to Anubis being a highly sacred deity in charge of the land where the gods originate far to the west. Duties of Anubis. According to surviving legends, he was the first Egyptian god of the underworld before being later replaced by Osiris. Anubis was also thought to have invented the mummification process that would last for the entirety of the Egyptian civilization. In the Osiris myth, it is Anubis who helps Isis to embalm her deceased husband. It's even said that Anubis was gifted the organs of Osiris after the process as a gift, further implying he was the patron deity of embalmers. Anubis was also the proctor of graves and cemeteries, but his most important role was that of guiding the deceased souls on a journey from the underworld to the afterlife. In Egyptian beliefs, the spirit or soul of those who had recently passed would embark on a dangerous journey to receive a final judgment from the gods. The weighing of the heart. To reach what the ancient Egyptians referred to as the paradise of the fields of reeds, otherwise known as the land of the gods, they would first have to pass through a trial held by a few deities that Anubis oversaw. As the deceased soul parted this world and began their journey to the next, they would arrive at the Hall of Truth. It was here that the sacred process of weighing the heart would take place. When it came to the judgment of the deceased, their heart, which the Egyptians believed to be the center of memory and identity, would be weighed against a feather. To the Egyptians, the feather represented the concept of truth and order. Anubis would carefully supervise this ordeal and check the balance to ensure that the person's heart was, in fact, the same weight as the feather. The weighing of the feather was the most sacred part of the journey, but even if they passed this test, a few more steps would soon follow. At a crucial point of the process, Anubis would have to vouch for the deceased and ultimately play a significant role in what would happen to their soul. To do so, he would invoke his canine nature. In front of the council of gods, Anubis would first sniff the deceased, as if they have the pleasant aroma of the gods. This would then suggest they belong to live among them. Anubis would then go on to ask the deceased a handful of questions, and when they were answered, only then would they be permitted to pass into the land of the gods. Many Egyptians had their own personal Bible that prepared them for these trials and gave them an advantage in the day of judgment. More details about these very curious processes in the Egyptian culture can be found in our video, Book of the Dead, the Bible of Ancient Egypt. How one may achieve a light heart. The ancient Egyptians' religious belief systems covered almost every aspect of life and even provided a guide on achieving a light heart. First and foremost, one maintained a light heart by embracing gratitude for all they've been given in life and disregarding negative thoughts centered on what others had. To the Egyptians, ingratitude was considered a heavy sin and would direct one down to a dark path of selfishness. Sin to the Egyptians was understood as thoughts and actions that went against the sacred values of Ma'at. This ultimately led to a separation from others and the gods themselves. The worst sin of all was covetousness, as it expressed an illicit desire for the gifts possessed by another, which in itself led back to ingratitude. The work known as the Instruction of Ptahhotep, one of the oldest of the wisdom texts of ancient Egypt, expressly warns against covetousness, citing its dangers and consequences. Covetousness made the soul heavy with sin because it encouraged pettiness, jealousy, self-pity, and especially expressed ingratitude. These sins made impressions on the soul, which weighed down the soul's heart and made it impossible for one to pass through the hall of truth and find paradise. This was a major concern for the ancient Egyptians, who understood that their life on earth was only one part of a much longer and grander journey. The soul, sacred texts, and prayers. The ancient Egyptians took their religious and spiritual beliefs seriously, and the entire civilization believed in the teachings. All would agree on the idea that an individual soul was immortal and part of an eternal being whose life on earth was but a part of a large and grander journey. So this is why the Egyptians followed the rules of Ma'at to ensure that when the time came to pass over from the world to the next, the weighing of the heart would allow them to proceed into the field of reeds. But after passing through the hall of truth, the judgment of Anubis, and onwards to paradise, there was one final step. The ancient Egyptians recognized that when the soul first awoke in the afterlife, it would be disoriented and might not remember its life on earth, death, or what was to do next. In order to help the soul continue on its journey, artists and scribes would create paintings and texts to relate to one's life on the walls of one's tomb, now known as the pyramid text, which then developed into the coffin text and the famous Egyptian Book of the Dead. The pyramid texts are the oldest religious works from ancient Egypt and among the oldest in the world, being dated to around 2400 BCE. This collection of writings, alongside its successor, the coffin text, and the Egyptian Book of the Dead, all serve the same purpose: to remind the soul of its life on earth, comforts its distress and disorientation, and direct it on to proceed in the afterlife. Let us know what you think about today's video in the comment section below. Do you think Anubis could be based on a real figure who presides over the gates to the Egyptian afterlife? And will we all have to weigh our hearts against a feather someday? Leave all your thoughts below. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.